I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is kind of a special podcast. This is my podcast from my head to your ears. I did an earlier podcast about my father and him passing, but today I want to honor a lighter side of the last days of his life, because I have a lot of good memories that I can kind of laugh about now, even though it's still the worst thing that ever happened to me. So I'm going to take a break and be back and talk about my dad. And I may have already covered this in the last podcast. I find that last one hard to listen to because I got pretty emotional on that one. But I'm going to kind of avoid that in this one. So I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast from my head to your ears. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast from my head to your ears. And I was cleaning my bathroom at 1:30 in the morning because that's what I do. I get the oddest urges to do housework at the weirdest times. I think it comes from my very many years as a midnight clerk at my job. And anyway, I kind of dragged my feet all day. I haven't felt good. I'm running a fever. But it started out, I wanted to take a shower. My bathroom's in terrible shape. And I thought, I got to clean this bathroom. It's just getting on my nerves. So that's what I was doing, and I had to take a break. And it dawned on me, it's after midnight, and today marks the 8th anniversary of my dad's last day on Earth, alive. And it's funny that affects me as much as the day he died, because it's such a odd story, or I don't know if it's even odd, but it's such a memorable story, and I'll talk about that later. I'm going to try to, like I said, I'm going to try to avoid not being emotional, and I want to be lighthearted with this tribute, because there was a lot of really cute moments in his last days, and my dad was so funny, and he was at the Heron Hospital, and then he was at Helia, and then he was at Good Sam Hospital in Mount Vernon, Illinois. And for those of you not from my area, these people that listen from other places, Mount Vernon, Illinois, and I'm digressing here, is the town where those ladies were from that were on Tosh 2.0 or whatever that show was. The I am too from Mount Vernon is my hometown. This is to my real hair. I don't know if you remember that, but anyway, that's Mount Vernon. That's where the hospital is. And it's a very nice hospital. My dad was there. They took good care of him. And I stayed with him as often as I could. My sister Kim did too. And mainly because we were available to do that. And I think my mom really wanted me to be there. It was kind of strange looking back that she didn't want to stay with me. And that's kind of not like my mom. Because when my sister was in the hospital with cancer, she really wanted to be there for her. But I think my mom always let me and my dad hang out. So she knows that, I think she knew that father-son moments, I think she knew that maybe I needed to take that time with him. And I'm very glad I did it, because it was a lot of time with my dad that I enjoyed. It wasn't, I don't know if I enjoyed it, but it was memorable. And I cherish those last months with him. I really do. This started, my dad was falling in ill health. He was losing weight. He needed a heart valve replacement. and he was just too frail to go through the surgery. And he had a really bad cataract, and I had just had eye surgery. I don't remember what month. It was in the winter of 2016. And he literally could not see anymore. And he wasn't watching football. He wasn't doing anything. And he was so depressed. And my dad was bad about not telling you what was going on with him. And I finally realized when he was knocking over cups, and I was like, Dad, you can't see. So I went into the doctor with him, and I convinced them that he needed cataract surgery. And sure enough, he had a really bad cataract in his left eye. And like me, which is very strange because I am Leonard Jr., he also was blind in his right eye, not to the extent that I am. I think he had some vision in his eye, but that eye was just kind of useless. It really just didn't have any vision whatsoever, quality vision. So when they would get glasses, he would just have a clear lens in it. They didn't even bother. Anyway, he'd given up driving at that point. Anyhow, but I convinced them to let him have cataract surgery, and he was not having it. He argued and argued and argued and was stubborn. And the day of the surgery, he was refusing to get up and go. And I swear he was like my child at that point. And I was like, you're going to get up and go. So we get him to the doctor, me and my sister Kim and my mom. And he has his surgery, and it worked out really good. And, excuse me. After it was done, he was kind of loopy, and he was not liking us talking to him like he was a little kid. He says, quit talking to me like I'm a baby. So, sorry, Dad, you know. So when he got out and actually got the eye patch, they let him have the eye patch off, and he could see so well that he's like, that is green, that is red. Oh my gosh, he was so thrilled that he could see. I mean, it was the greatest moment with my dad, just that he could see again, and he was so thrilled. And I was so glad that I was kind of onto him like my child. And by gosh, that's something I don't regret. But what followed was, and of course I tell stories like Edith Bunker. I go into great detail, and they kind of have side stories. What followed was a series of eye drops and eye patches that he would not keep on. And he had to have eye drops every few hours, and I had to work, so I couldn't do the eye drops. So my sister was coming over and giving him the eye drops when I was at work. So it was, oh God, it was a kind of a nightmare because he was so stubborn, especially with the eye patch. He wouldn't wear it, and he was supposed to cover his eye as much as he could, and he just wasn't having it. And one afternoon I had to work evenings. I had to work a 4-hour shift, I believe, a 6 to 10 in the evening. And my mom was making him, I'll never forget this, making him corn dogs, making his supper. And he was sitting there watching TV. And I said, yeah, well, we need to get your eye drops in, Dad. And I put the eye drops in, he held his head back, and he continued to hold his head back. And I'm like, Dad, you don't have to hold your head back for that long. You can get up. I said, why don't you get up and go have your corn dogs? And he says, okay. So he gets up. I turn around, and I'm not joking. I turned around 1 second, and down he went. And I mean, it was the most sickening thud I ever heard. And he had fallen several times, like really bad falls. But this one was the one. This is the one that broke his hip. And I'm just like, oh my God, Dad. he's like, you go on, get ready for work. You just go on. I'll be fine. Just let me sit here. And I said, I'm not leaving you on the floor. So we kind of get him up to the couch. Excuse me. And he was in a lot of pain. I could tell. So I went ahead and went to work. And I was trying to remember. I called my sister when I got to work and I said, hey, could you go check on Dad because I'm afraid he's broke his hip. So, yes, he did. He broke his hip and he ended up here in hospital. And while he was there, he was quite the character. I had a friend that worked there and he would say, yoo-hoo, I need my litter box changed. He called his bedpan his litter box. And just little things. And one day he got fixated on a flower on the wall. And somehow he associated that with a funeral home. And he calls me at like 10 o'clock at night when I was in bed to work days the next day. And he says, Leonard, is this Leonard? And I said, yeah, Dad. He says, well, they're going to take me down to the morgue. And that's going to be the end of me. And I said, what? He says, yeah, you need to get here quick because they're going to take me down to that morgue. And I'm like, Dad, they're not going to take you down to the morgue. He's like, wait a minute. Who am I talking to? And I said, it's your son. I don't think it is. Oh my gosh. I said, Dad, I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call Kim and see if she can stay with you. So she did. Because I had to work and I had planned to be with him on my days off. So she had a good time with him. They watched cowboy movies and they talked all night about the war and World War II. And she had a really good visit with her dad. And I know she treasures that now, too. So, because her and my dad were pretty close. And that was a special moment for her. So, I get over there and, they had him on some really good drugs. And sometimes he thought he was back in World War II. He told me to tell my mom to go back to the States and have a good time. No, he said, go back to the States and live it up. Live it up. Excuse me. Gosh, I hate having coughs. I still chuckle about that. It's like, oh my gosh. So anyway, he was quite the character, and luckily at Heron Hospital, I had a lot of friends that worked there, and they kept an eye on me when I wasn't able to be there. So anyway, we ended up putting him in a rehabilitation place to learn to walk after he had his hip surgery. And his mental state wasn't great. He wasn't catching on. He did not like being in that nursing home. He wanted to come home, and he begged me every day to come home. And I felt like I was lying to him because I didn't know what was going to happen at that point. And he was only supposed to be there 2 weeks. So he just wasn't taking on to that surgery, and he ended up getting a bad infection, ended up in Good Sam, and I spent a great deal of time. I missed a lot of work, spent a great deal of my time up there with him, and they thought he had C. diff, so I had to wear a cap and gown. Now, Good Sam Hospital is a newer hospital, and it had an incredible cafeteria downstairs. And my dad, we watched a lot of TV together, and like I said, I don't regret that time with my dad because I enjoyed being there with him. And he liked to watch 2.5 Men, oddly enough. That was his favorite show. And he also would like to look at the lights in the room and, all this stuff. And he was appreciating being able to see. But he started getting an infection in his lungs, and he had a wheeze, and he was laying there, and he would wheeze, and he would say, "Who's doing that?" And I'd be like, "Dad, that's you." "No, it isn't. Tell that guy behind me to quit doing that." And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh. Okay, guy behind him quit doing that." "Oh, he's still doing it." "Okay, hey, stop it or I'm going to whip you." And oh my gosh. He griped about that all night. There was no sleeping. I don't think you can sleep in a hospital anyway. But they finally got him some oxygen. And anyway, the one day I decided to go home, the one day I was just exhausted. I needed to go take a shower at home, and I needed to spend a night in my own bed. And I was missing a lot of work. Luckily I had vacation time. And the minute we left, we weren't 7 miles down the road, and he went to AFib, and we had to turn back around, and they were working on him when we got back. And the nurses assured me they got him under control and to go on home and get some rest. So I did, which I've always been told, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't help anybody else. And I was pretty exhausted at that point. So I went home and got a good night's sleep, and went back the next day, and he was sleeping, and I asked the nurse, I said, "So what's going on with him?" She said, "Well, we believe he had a heart attack, and they have a mass on his lungs." And I'm like, "What? Where did that come from?" So anyway, his body just started closing down. So he was a good Sam for a while, and then he went back to Elia. And I got there, and they had to talk to me about possibly having a biopsy on his lungs, and do I think he should do that? And I was like, I really don't. I don't think he would make it. He was so frail at this point. But my favorite funny memory of that time, I was 49 years old, and I'm the baby of the family. I am his son. I'm his only son. I'm his baby Leonard. And he goes, "How old are you?" "How old are you?" I said, "Dad, I'm going to be 50. "No, you're not going to be 50. You ask your mom." I'm like, oh my God. So, I just still chuckle about that so much. But we had gone several times. My buddy Brandon took me over there. My boss and her sister took me over there. Everybody was really good about helping me get over there to see him. My mom and my sister would go. And we went, I think, I don't remember who was with me at this point, and I'm usually got a good memory, but the reason why I can't remember what who I was with is because of what he said was so crazy. It wasn't crazy. It was just it was memorable. But he looked at us. He said, "I just had a lady in white come visit me, and she said I was coming home. And I know you think I'm crazy. You know my mind's not right, but I'm telling you this happened." Well, the nurse was in there taking care of his roommate, and she looked at me and said, "Nobody's been in here." And she looks at, "No, he's not seen it." And I'm like, and my sister thought, "Oh, good, he's going to come home." And I said, "Kimmy's, no, to this day, I think he was visited by an angel who told him everything was going to be all right. He's coming home soon." And after that, he didn't fear dying. He was a little more, I think he knew he wasn't going to make it out of that nursing home. But we were getting ready. His paid stay there was over. We were running into a period where his insurance wasn't covering it, and we were going to have to come up with the costs. So we were going to get him home, and we got my buddy Brandon's wife, Amber, my good friend Amber, came over and helped me clean out the front bedroom, and we got ready for him for a hospital bed and everything. And we were getting ready. And I'll never forget, it was a Friday. It was May 6th, which is today, as I'm doing this podcast. And this is hard. My sister was going to see him with Mom, and honestly, and I don't know, I had to stop and re-record this podcast, and I'm not feeling good, so I don't remember if I started to say this before, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. I think it was the part that I deleted and I've started over again, so I may be repeating myself. I might have to listen to this and edit it later. But you would think with your close loved ones that you would have a voice that tells you to go see him because they're not going to be with us. This will be the last time you see him. But the voice that I heard was, get some rest. And rest I did. I had to work midnights that night, and my sister and my mom went to see him, and it was beautiful out. It was a day before, it was Friday, and it was Mother's Day weekend, and they had a barbecue and all kinds of stuff going on at the nursing home, and they got to take him outside, and he got to see the hummingbirds, and it was just a beautiful day, and everybody was telling him how handsome he was, and he looked like Tyrone Power. If you don't know who that is, he's an old movie star. And my dad had told me that they used to say he looked like Tyrone Power, which my dad had coal black hair and green eyes, and I could see why they said that. My dad was a good-looking guy my dad was a good-looking guy when he died. But he just loved that attention. And my sister and my mom willed him. He said, I want to go take a nap. Could you will me back to my room? And so they did. And they willed him to his room, and they put him in bed. And he said, go home and rest. I told them that. I'm pretty sure that's what he told them. And they came back. Well, I was sound asleep. I slept till 9 o'clock. That night I had to work at 10, or I slept at, whatever time I got up to go in at 10. I slept so soundly, and it was so relaxed and so peaceful. Like I said, I had no idea what was going to happen the next overnight while I worked. And I went to work. And like I said, you'd think you'd have an inkling of something's happened, but that doesn't happen. I had a fun night. I joked around with the police officers, and it wasn't a bad night. And the manager of the Benton store called and wanted to know if we had any extra help. And I kept getting this phone call from somewhere. And I said, I know this phone call. I'm better to see who this is. Well, it was them calling to tell me that he had passed. And what comes to my mind now is the fact that I was telling you the voice that tells you, they're going to die. Instead, the voice told me to rest. It's a good thing I got a good night's rest, because I'm the man of the family. Maybe that's sexist, but a lot was left for me to do, and I'm not griping about that. It was the way it was supposed to be, and I'm glad I had my wits about me, even though I was deeply grieving. I think my job has taught me how to be calm and handle things, because you get thrown all sorts of things when you're managing a store. I was assistant manager, and anyway, I think my job training for keeping it together. And but the worst part was after I made the phone calls, and then the realization hits and the emotions come, and I thought, I don't want to walk through the store. I'm squalling like a baby. And then I had to go tell my mom. She didn't know yet, and my sister. So anyway, that was that. And it's weird that that's 8 years ago. Time has flown by. And like I said, these anniversaries hit hard. And I wanted to do this podcast because this is on my mind right now. And I hadn't planned to do a podcast. It just came to me. Matter of fact, I'm going to have a special guest on my next podcast, by the way. And I promised. But I told him I wasn't in the mood to do one now. I didn't have time, so don't call me a liar. This kind of just happened. Anyway, I'm going to take a break. I'm Leonard Riggs. This is my podcast from my head to your ears. I'm Leonard Riggs. This is my podcast from my head to your ears, and I'm back. I was talking about my dad's last day on Earth 8 years ago today, which is May 6th, 2016. He died May 7th, 2016. I thought instead of talking about his death, I wanted to talk about his last bit of life. So I love all those stories and I'll cherish them forever. And I like to tell them. I may have told these again in the old podcast I did last year about my dad. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I'm in a different place this year. I've got a lot going on, and it's amazing how, and this is what bothers me, that life's gone on. You know, it's just weird to think that you actually move on from losing someone so important to you, and you don't forget them. Honestly, I forget his voice sometimes, and I have some recordings of him that are really hard to watch, but it's good to see him. And every time now and then I have a dream about him, and we're just hanging out, and it's comforting. My mom loved my dad so bad. I mean, she literally has shut down since he's been gone. And of course, I've talked about being a caregiver for my mom for 8 years. And she literally, the night we buried Dad, she just shut down. Her mind just almost quit working altogether. And it was just very odd. And in a way, I find that it's really a blessing in disguise, because I think that was so hurtful to her. Because my mom and dad were very, very, very close. And they fought a lot, but they sure loved each other. And boy, he loved her. Whew. I know he wanted me to take care of her. And I hope I've honored him. So anyway, it's always good to take time to honor your loved ones on these anniversaries. And there's this great saying, and I've said it before, again, I'm repeating myself, but how wonderful is it to have something that was so hard to let go of, or so hard to say goodbye to. Excuse me. And that's very true. I'm very glad that I had such a great dad, and he was my buddy, my movie buddy, and my biggest supporter. And nobody loves me like my mom and dad did. Nobody. I mean, anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here, and thank you for listening. Again, this has been a special edition of my podcast. Excuse me, I'm trying to cough again. And I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast from my head to your ears. Thank you for listening. I love you guys.